Evelyn Harper is a woman who seems to have it all: an empire she built from the ground up, the respect of the business world, and a life of luxury. But behind the pristine facade, danger is brewing. Her ambitious husband, Daniel, and her trusted associate, Sean, have devised a plan to take everything from her, even if it means putting her life at risk. When a streetwise teenager named Riley overhears their sinister plot, her decision to intervene sets off a chain of events that will change both their lives forever. As Evelyn confronts the betrayal of those closest to her, she finds herself navigating a world of deception and danger with Riley by her side. Can Evelyn outsmart the people plotting against her? Will Riley's courage and resilience be enough to help uncover the truth and bring justice? And how will these two unlikely allies find strength in each other as they rebuild from the ashes of betrayal? Evelyn Harper stood by the grand window of her mansion, her arms crossed as she gazed at the sprawling lawn bathed in the golden hues of the setting sun. The mansion was a masterpiece, with its towering columns and flawless landscaping, nestled in the most prestigious neighborhood in the city. Every piece of furniture, every intricate carving on the banisters, spoke of success. Yet, the perfection of her surroundings only heightened the silence in the vast rooms. Evelyn had worked tirelessly to reach this pinnacle of achievement. The countless late nights spent negotiating deals, managing setbacks, and outthinking competitors had molded her into the powerful businesswoman she was today. At 45, she was the CEO of a multi-million-dollar conglomerate, respected and feared in the business world. But despite the accolades and awards that adorned the shelves of her study, a quiet ache lingered in her chest, one she chose to ignore. Behind her, the faint clink of ice against glass broke the silence. Daniel Harper, her husband of 8 years, was pouring himself a drink in the spacious marble-topped bar in the living room. His charm had once been intoxicating, his easy smile and supportive demeanor a respite during Evelyn's grueling rise to success. But over time, cracks had formed in their relationship, subtle yet undeniable. "Another busy day for you tomorrow?" Daniel asked, his tone casual as he swirled the amber liquid in his glass. Evelyn turned to him, her expression softening. "Yes, another negotiation. It's an important acquisition for the company, but I'll make time for us soon, Daniel. I promise." Daniel smiled faintly, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of restlessness. "Of course, you always do." His words stung more than Evelyn let on. She wanted to protest, to remind him of the sacrifices she had made for both their futures, but instead, she offered a small smile and changed the subject. As Evelyn moved to her study to review the documents for the next day's meeting, Daniel remained in the living room, staring at his drink. He had married Evelyn for many reasons: her drive, her brilliance, and the stability she offered. But lately, he had felt like a fixture in her life, present but overlooked. The thought festered, and he found himself wondering if there was more for him beyond these gilded walls. Across the city, Riley Cooper huddled under a tattered blanket in an abandoned alley, her stomach growling from another day without food. At 17, Riley had already seen the worst of what life could offer. Her mother had passed away when she was just 10, and her father, unable to cope, had turned to alcohol and eventually disappeared. Riley's life had become a blur of shelters, odd jobs, and cold nights. She had no one to call family, no place to call home. Yet she clung to a stubborn hope, a belief that something better awaited her if she could just hold on a little longer. As the night deepened, Riley noticed the warm glow from the windows of a nearby building. It was a small diner, its neon sign flickering against the darkness. Her stomach tightened at the thought of food, but she knew she had no money. Still, she wandered closer, drawn to the comforting hum of conversation and the faint aroma of freshly baked bread. She peeked through the window, watching patrons laugh and share meals. For a moment, she let herself imagine what it would be like to sit inside, to be warm and full. Just as she was about to turn away, the door swung open, and a kind-looking waitress stepped out, holding a paper bag. "Hey," the waitress called softly, her voice carrying over the quiet street. "I saw you out here. Thought you might want this." Riley hesitated, her instincts screaming to retreat, but the warmth in the woman's eyes kept her rooted in place. "Go on. It's just some leftovers. No charge." Taking a tentative step forward, Riley accepted the bag, murmuring a shaky, "Thank you." The waitress smiled, giving her a gentle pat on the shoulder before disappearing back into the diner. Riley sat on the curb, opening the bag to find a sandwich and a small container of soup. The meal was simple, but it felt like a feast. As she ate, tears welled in her eyes not from the food itself, but from the unexpected kindness. It was moments like these that reminded her why she kept going, why she believed in the goodness of people, despite everything she had endured. The next morning, Evelyn stood by her car, glancing at her phone as her driver prepared for the trip. The sleek vehicle gleamed under the sunlight, a symbol of her meticulous nature. As she scrolled through her emails, she felt a faint twinge of unease, a sense she couldn't quite place. Daniel appeared behind her, his hands casually tucked into his pockets. "Good luck today," he said, his voice smooth. Evelyn nodded absently, distracted by the weight of the upcoming meeting. She didn't notice the flicker of tension in his expression or the way he quickly turned away. As the car pulled out of the driveway, Evelyn glanced at the city passing by, her mind already on the negotiations ahead. But the nagging unease lingered, growing stronger with each passing mile. Back in the alley, Riley sat with her bag of belongings, her thoughts drifting to the kind waitress from the night before. She decided to head back to the diner, hoping to thank her properly. As she approached the building, her path took her past a parking lot where two men stood in hushed conversation. Riley instinctively slowed her steps, staying in the shadows. She recognized one of them as Daniel Harper, whose face she had seen in business magazines. "Once she's out of the picture, everything will be ours," Daniel said, his tone low but deliberate. Riley's heart pounded as she realized they were talking about Evelyn Harper. She didn't understand the full context, but the danger was clear. Quietly retreating, Riley wrestled with what to do. She had no connection to Evelyn, no reason to involve herself. But the memory of the waitress's kindness haunted her. Someone had extended a hand when she needed it most. Maybe it was her turn to do the same. Later that day, Evelyn returned home after a successful negotiation. She felt a fleeting sense of satisfaction, but was quickly reminded of the tension between her and Daniel. As she prepared for bed, her phone buzzed with a new email. It was a message from a client praising her work. Evelyn stared at it for a moment, her thoughts drifting to her younger self, the ambitious dreamer who had believed she could have it all. She wondered if she had lost something along the way, a piece of herself that had once cherished connection over achievement. Little did she know, her world was about to change in ways she could never have imagined. Evelyn woke early the next morning, the soft light filtering through her bedroom window. She stretched briefly before checking her calendar, a habit ingrained from years of meticulous planning. Today was another packed day, but the lingering unease from the day before still tugged at her mind. Downstairs, the scent of freshly brewed coffee wafted through the air. Daniel was already in the kitchen, leaning casually against the counter with a mug in hand. He greeted her with a warm smile, one that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Morning," he said, setting his cup down as Evelyn entered. "Good morning," she replied, brushing a strand of hair from her face as she poured her own coffee. "Busy day ahead for you?" Daniel hesitated for just a moment, but Evelyn didn't catch it. "Not particularly. Thought I'd take it easy." She nodded, preoccupied with the flurry of tasks waiting for her. As Evelyn sat at the dining table, reviewing notes for an upcoming board meeting, Daniel's phone buzzed on the counter. He glanced at the screen, his expression hardening for an instant before softening again. "Client issue," he muttered, grabbing the phone. "I'll take this upstairs." Evelyn barely looked up, her focus on her notes. Upstairs, Daniel locked the door to his study before answering the call. "Sean," he said, his voice low, "we're still on for tomorrow morning, right?" Sean Bennett's voice crackled on the other end of the line. "Of course, everything's in place. Just stick to the plan." Daniel exhaled sharply. "And you're sure there won't be any loose ends?" "There won't be. Evelyn trusts me completely. She'll never see it coming." Daniel nodded, a mix of guilt and determination crossing his face. "Good. Let's finish this." That same morning, Riley sat on the curb outside the diner, clutching her tattered bag. She hadn't slept much after overhearing Daniel and Sean's conversation the night before. The few words she had caught echoed in her mind, each one dripping with danger. She didn't know Evelyn personally, but she knew enough to recognize her name. Evelyn Harper's success was the kind of thing people in her position could only dream about. And now someone was trying to take it all away, maybe even her life. Riley's mind raced with conflicting thoughts. Why should she care? Evelyn was wealthy, powerful, and untouchable. But then she thought about the waitress who had handed her a meal without hesitation, expecting nothing in return. "Sometimes people just need someone to care," the waitress had said. The memory lingered, pushing Riley to decide. She stood, brushing the dust off her jeans, and began walking. Evelyn was on her way out the door when she saw Riley through the wrought iron gates of her mansion. At first, she thought the girl was simply passing by, but the way Riley hovered near the entrance caught her attention. Riley hesitated, her heart pounding as Evelyn stepped closer. The polished elegance of Evelyn's tailored suit and the confident way she carried herself made Riley feel small, almost foolish. "Can I help you?" Evelyn asked, her tone polite but wary. Riley swallowed hard, clutching the straps of her bag. I need to talk to you. It's about your safety." Evelyn frowned, unsure whether to dismiss the girl or hear her out. Something about the desperation in Riley's voice made her pause. "All right," Evelyn said cautiously, "but make it quick. I'm running late." Riley took a deep breath, her words tumbling out in a rush. "I overheard your husband and another man, Sean, I think, talking last night. They're planning something. I don't know everything, but they said something about getting you out of the picture. I think it's serious." Evelyn stared at her, disbelief and irritation flashing across her face. "You must be mistaken. My husband would never—" "Please," Riley interrupted, her voice trembling. "I know how it sounds, but I'm telling the truth. Just check your car before you leave today, please." For a moment, Evelyn considered sending the girl away. But something about Riley's intensity, her fear, made Evelyn reconsider. "Stay here," Evelyn said finally, pulling out her phone. She dialed her driver, instructing him to delay their departure and inspect the car. Riley waited, fidgeting nervously as Evelyn paced near the gate. Minutes later, the driver returned, his face pale. "The brakes," he said quietly. "They've been tampered with." Evelyn's heart sank as the driver's words confirmed Riley's warning. She turned to the girl, a mixture of fear and gratitude in her eyes. "Get inside," Evelyn said. "We need to talk." In the mansion's sunlit sitting room, Evelyn listened as Riley recounted everything she had overheard. The girl's words were fragmented and hesitant, but they painted a chilling picture. Evelyn's mind raced. Betrayal wasn't new to her, she'd faced it in business countless times. But to think Daniel, the man she had trusted and loved, could be part of this? The thought was almost too much to bear. "You've done something incredibly brave by coming here," Evelyn said at last, her voice steady despite the storm brewing inside her. Riley shrugged, looking down at her worn sneakers. "I just thought someone should know. I didn't want something bad to happen to you." Evelyn studied the girl more closely. Beneath the grime and the guarded expression was someone with a good heart, someone who had risked a lot to help a stranger. "Do you have somewhere to go?" Evelyn asked gently. Riley hesitated, then shook her head. Evelyn sighed. the weight of the situation settling on her shoulders. Stay here for now. We'll figure out the rest later. But first, we need a plan. As Riley nodded, a faint glimmer of hope crossed her face. For the first time in a long while, she felt like she wasn't entirely alone. Upstairs, Daniel stared out the window, oblivious to the conversation happening below. He checked his phone, a sense of triumph bubbling beneath his calm exterior. Tomorrow, everything would change. Or so he thought. Evelyn Harper sat at the head of the gleaming mahogany dining table, her thoughts clouded by the revelation Riley had delivered. The young girl had since been given a room for the night and a proper meal, but Evelyn's mind was elsewhere. She had spent hours replaying the moments leading up to this betrayal, Daniel's distant smiles, his distracted presence at dinners, the way he had quietly encouraged her to trust Sean. It was all there, in hindsight. The quiet manipulation, the careful erosion of boundaries. She leaned back in her chair and exhaled deeply. For all her business acumen and her ability to read people, she had failed to see what was right under her nose. Evelyn's gaze drifted to the documents spread before her. They weren't the business contracts she usually pored over, but instead contained financial records and correspondences between Daniel and Sean, hastily forwarded by one of her most trusted assistants after a midnight phone call. The transactions were damning, small enough to be overlooked in the broader scope of her empire, but significant enough to prove collusion. The evidence was mounting, but Evelyn knew she needed more. This wasn't just about exposing Daniel's betrayal. It was about ensuring he and Sean couldn't worm their way out of the consequences. A soft knock at the door broke her train of thought. "Come in," she called, straightening her posture. Riley entered hesitantly, clutching a steaming mug of tea. She had taken a shower, her tangled hair now clean and tied back, revealing a face much younger than Evelyn had initially realized. "I thought you might need this," Riley said, placing the mug on the table. Evelyn offered a faint smile. "Thank you. That's very thoughtful." Riley lingered, unsure if she should leave. "Sit," Evelyn said after a moment, gesturing to the chair opposite her. Riley hesitated but complied, folding her hands on the table. "You said you overheard them in a parking lot," Evelyn began, her tone measured. "Yeah," Riley replied. "I wasn't trying to spy or anything. I was looking for a place to sleep, and I saw them talking. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but when I heard what they were saying—" Her voice faltered, and she looked down at her hands. "You did the right thing," Evelyn assured her. "I can't imagine it was easy for you to come here." Riley shrugged. "I figured someone had to say something. And you're like, this big deal. Everyone talks about you, how you built all this. Seemed wrong to let them get away with it." Evelyn studied the girl's face, noting the shadows under her eyes and the cautious way she spoke. Riley was clearly someone who had learned to navigate the world with guarded steps. "Where are your parents?" Evelyn asked gently. Riley tensed, her shoulders rising slightly. "Gone. My mom passed a while ago, and my dad, I don't know where he is." Evelyn nodded, sensing it was a wound too raw to press further. "You're brave," she said instead. "Most people wouldn't have stepped in the way you did." Riley shrugged again, but her lips twitched into the faintest smile. Upstairs, Daniel paced the length of his study. His phone buzzed with a message from Sean. "Everything's set for tomorrow. Stay calm." He clenched his jaw, the anticipation gnawing at him. Once Evelyn was out of the way, he could finally live the life he had envisioned. No more feeling like a trophy husband, overshadowed by her relentless ambition. He would have the company, the power, and the freedom he deserved. But beneath his confidence was a whisper of doubt. Evelyn was no fool. If she suspected anything, the entire plan could unravel. Daniel pushed the thought aside, reassuring himself that Sean's meticulous planning had left no room for error. That evening, Evelyn and Riley sat in the living room, the soft glow of a lamp illuminating the space. "Tell me something," Evelyn said, breaking the silence. Riley glanced at her. What? Why did you help me? Riley considered the question for a moment. I don't know. I guess I've had people help me before. Like last night, at the diner. The waitress didn't have to give me food, but she did. And I've never been able to pay that kind of thing back, you know? So, when I heard them talking about you, I just thought maybe this was my chance. Evelyn nodded slowly, her chest tightening at the girl's words. Riley's story wasn't unfamiliar to her. Once upon a time, Evelyn herself had been just a step away from losing everything. She had clawed her way to the top, but she had never forgotten what it felt like to have nothing. I owe you my life, Evelyn said quietly. Riley looked down at her lap, clearly uncomfortable with the sentiment. You don't owe me anything. Evelyn smiled faintly. I disagree. The next morning, Evelyn rose before the sun. She had spent the night planning her next move, coordinating with her legal team and a private investigator she trusted implicitly. Riley had insisted on staying nearby, ready to help however she could. As Evelyn prepared to leave the mansion for her supposed meeting, she glanced at her reflection in the mirror. Her face was calm, her expression unreadable. This was a game she had played many times before, though the stakes had never been this personal. Downstairs, Riley waited by the door, her bag slung over one shoulder. You're sure about this? Riley asked, her voice tinged with concern. Evelyn nodded. I've faced worse. Trust me. Riley bit her lip but said nothing more. As Evelyn stepped into the waiting car, her driver gave her a knowing nod. They had already gone over the plan. The car wouldn't be going to the meeting, but to a secure location where Evelyn could safely orchestrate her counterattack. Riley watched from the driveway as the car disappeared down the long, winding road. A part of her wanted to follow, to make sure Evelyn stayed safe. But she knew her role was here, keeping an eye on the house and waiting for the next phase of their plan. Unbeknownst to her, Daniel stood in the shadows of an upstairs window, watching the same car leave. A satisfied smile spread across his face. By this time tomorrow, everything would be different, or so he believed. Evelyn Harper leaned back in the leather seat of the car, her hands gripping her phone tightly. The driver, an older man named Robert who had been with her for years, glanced at her in the rearview mirror. Everything all right, ma'am? He asked, his voice steady. Evelyn nodded faintly. I'm fine, Robert. Just keep driving. But she wasn't fine. Her mind raced with the weight of the past 24 hours. Daniel's betrayal had shaken her more deeply than she wanted to admit. For years, she had believed they were partners in life, that he admired her drive and shared her vision for the future. Now, that illusion was shattered. The car reached a small, secluded property on the outskirts of the city. Evelyn stepped out, greeted by her private investigator, Lisa Morgan. Lisa was a no-nonsense woman in her late 50s, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Everything's set, Lisa said briskly, leading Evelyn inside. The house was modest but well-equipped for their needs, with secure communication lines and surveillance equipment set up on a large dining table. Evelyn settled into a chair, scanning the monitors that displayed live feeds from her office, home, and various locations where she suspected Daniel and Sean might meet. Are you sure about this staged accident plan? Lisa asked, crossing her arms. It's risky. Evelyn nodded. It's the only way to draw them out. They need to believe they've succeeded, at least for a little while. Lisa frowned, but didn't argue. We'll be ready to move when you give the signal. Back at the Harper mansion, Riley was restless. Evelyn had entrusted her with a burner phone and strict instructions to stay out of sight and wait for updates. But waiting wasn't something Riley was good at. She paced the living room, glancing out the window every few minutes. The house was eerily quiet without Evelyn's commanding presence. Her thoughts drifted back to the diner and the waitress who had shown her kindness. Riley still carried the crumpled napkin the woman had given her, scribbled with words of encouragement. You're stronger than you think. Keep going. The words felt distant now, overshadowed by the weight of everything she had become involved in. Riley wasn't sure if she belonged here, in this world of wealth and power. But Evelyn had trusted her, and that meant something. Meanwhile, Daniel was at Sean's office, his confidence growing with each passing hour. "You're sure everything went according to plan?" he asked Sean, who leaned casually against his desk. "Positive," Sean replied, a smirk playing on his lips. "The mechanic was thorough. By now she's either in the hospital or—" He let the sentence trail off, but the implication was clear. Daniel exhaled slowly, a mixture of relief and unease washing over him. It was what he had wanted, wasn't it? "Good," Daniel said, forcing his voice to remain steady. "Then we move forward. I'll handle the transition at the company. You just make sure no one connects us to this." Sean raised an eyebrow. "Relax. I've got everything under control." Riley was sitting on the edge of the couch when the burner phone buzzed. She snatched it up quickly, her heart racing. "Evelyn?" she asked, her voice trembling. "It's me," Evelyn replied, her tone calm but firm. "I need you to listen carefully." Riley clutched the phone tighter, hanging on to every word as Evelyn outlined the next steps. They had to let Daniel and Sean believe the staged accident was real, but Evelyn needed Riley to keep an eye on the mansion for any signs of movement or unexpected visitors. "I know this is a lot to ask," Evelyn said, her voice softening, "but I need someone I can trust right now. You've already proven you're capable." Riley hesitated, then nodded even though Evelyn couldn't see her. "I'll do it. Just be careful, okay?" Evelyn smiled faintly on the other end of the line. "I will." The next morning, news of Evelyn's accident spread quickly. Major news outlets reported the story with somber tones, speculating on the future of her company and her legacy. Daniel played his part well, appearing in front of the press with a carefully rehearsed expression of grief. "It's a devastating loss," he said, his voice heavy with faux emotion. "Evelyn was a remarkable woman, and her contributions to the business world will never be forgotten." Sean stayed in the background, avoiding the cameras but keeping a close eye on Daniel. They had come this far, and everything was falling into place. At the mansion, Riley watched the press conference on the living room television, her stomach churning. Seeing Daniel's crocodile tears made her want to throw something at the screen. She glanced at the burner phone, half expecting it to buzz again with more instructions, but it remained silent, leaving her alone with her thoughts. As the day wore on, Riley's unease grew. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to go wrong. Sure enough, later that evening, a sleek black car pulled into the driveway. Riley peeked out from behind the curtains, her heart pounding as she saw Sean step out. He carried a leather briefcase and moved with purpose toward the front door. Riley ducked behind the couch, holding her breath as the door opened, and Sean's voice echoed through the entryway. "Daniel," Sean called. "We need to talk." Riley couldn't make out the rest of their conversation, but she knew she had to act fast. She grabbed the burner phone and slipped out the back door, dialing Evelyn's number as she moved. "Evelyn," she whispered urgently when the line connected. "Sean's here. He's talking to Daniel about something. I think it's important." "Stay calm," Evelyn replied. "I'm on my way. Just stay out of sight and keep an ear on them if you can." Riley nodded, even though the idea of eavesdropping on two dangerous men made her stomach churn. She crept back toward the house, slipping through a side entrance and positioning herself near the hallway where their voices carried. "With her gone, we can move forward with the transition," Sean was saying. Daniel's response was quieter, but his tone was sharp. "We need to make sure everything looks legitimate. No loose ends." Riley's pulse quickened as she realized just how deep their plans went. Outside, headlights cut through the darkness as Evelyn's car approached the mansion. Her jaw was set, her mind focused on the task ahead. She wasn't just fighting for her company or her legacy anymore. She was fighting for herself, for the part of her that had once believed in trust, loyalty, and resilience. As she stepped out of the car, Evelyn's eyes hardened. It was time to confront the truth. The Harper mansion was cloaked in an eerie stillness as Evelyn stepped through the side entrance, careful not to make a sound. Riley had texted her moments earlier, confirming that Daniel and Sean were still in the sitting room. Her heels clicked faintly on the tiled floor as she made her way to the small study near the back of the house. It was a room she rarely used but had prepared that morning, transforming it into a command center of sorts. Her investigator, Lisa, had left a laptop synced with hidden cameras installed throughout the mansion. Evelyn could see and hear everything happening in the sitting room. She settled into the chair, her heart pounding as she adjusted the audio feed. "Once the paperwork goes through, the board will back me," Daniel was saying. He sat on the plush leather couch, his posture relaxed, but his tone edged with tension. Sean leaned against the fireplace, his arms crossed. "Are you sure? They might start asking questions, especially if someone decides to dig into the accident." Daniel scoffed. "Let them dig. I'll handle it. Evelyn's gone and I'm her husband. No one will challenge my claim." The words were a knife to Evelyn's chest, but she forced herself to stay calm, to listen. Sean didn't look convinced. "I hope you're right, because if this falls apart, it's both of us on the line." "It won't," Daniel said firmly. "Just stick to the plan." Evelyn clenched her fists, anger simmering beneath her cool exterior. For years, she had believed in Daniel, trusted him, even when the signs of his discontent had begun to show. Now, she saw him for what he truly was: calculating, self-serving, and willing to destroy her for his own gain. Her phone vibrated softly, pulling her attention away from the screen. Riley's name flashed across the display. "They're leaving the room," Riley whispered when Evelyn answered. "Good," Evelyn replied. "Stay hidden. I'll take it from here." Daniel and Sean moved to the kitchen, their conversation lowering as they poured themselves drinks. Evelyn took the opportunity to slip into the sitting room, her eyes scanning the space. On the coffee table, Sean's leather briefcase sat partially open, papers spilling out. Evelyn crouched down, her heart racing as she flipped through the documents. There it was, their blueprint for taking over her company. Forged signatures, falsified board approvals, and a list of assets they intended to liquidate. Evelyn pulled out her phone, snapping pictures of everything before carefully placing the papers back as they were. Her mind was already working on the next steps. The documents were enough to implicate both men, but she needed them on record, admitting to their actions. As Daniel and Sean returned, Evelyn slipped back into the shadows, watching from the hallway as they resumed their conversation. "You should head out," Daniel said, his tone casual but firm. "We can't be seen together too often, not until everything settles." Sean nodded, draining the last of his drink. "Call me if anything changes." Evelyn waited until the front door closed behind Sean before stepping into the room. "Busy evening?" she asked, her voice cutting through the quiet. Daniel froze, the color draining from his face. He turned slowly, his eyes wide as he saw her standing there, alive and very much in control. "Evelyn," he stammered, I thought, dead?" She finished for him, her tone icy. "Not quite." Daniel's mouth opened and closed, searching for words, but Evelyn didn't give him the chance. "I know everything, Daniel," she said, stepping closer. "The tampered brakes, the staged accident, the fake signatures. I know about Sean, about your plans to take over the company. Did you really think I wouldn't find out?" He tried to recover, plastering on a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Evelyn, this is a misunderstanding." "Sean?" "Don't," she snapped, her voice sharp enough to make him flinch. "Do not insult my intelligence by pretending this was anyone's idea but yours." Daniel's expression hardened, the facade cracking. "Fine. You're right. I wanted out, Evelyn. You never had time for me. Everything was always about your company, your success. I was just there." His words stung, but Evelyn refused to let him see it. "So you decided to kill me?" she asked, her voice cold. Daniel didn't answer, but his silence spoke volumes. Evelyn stepped back, her gaze steady. "I trusted you, and you betrayed me." She turned and walked out of the room, leaving him standing there, speechless. Back in the study, Evelyn called Lisa, her voice calm but firm. "It's time. Send the police." By the time they arrived, Daniel was sitting alone in the kitchen, nursing another drink. He didn't resist as the officers cuffed him, though his expression was a mixture of anger and disbelief. Evelyn watched from the doorway, her arms crossed as she met his gaze one final time. "You made your choice, Daniel," she said quietly, "and now you'll face the consequences." Riley stood in the driveway as the police cars pulled away, her hands stuffed in her jacket pockets. Evelyn approached her, the weight of the evening settling over them both. "Thank you," Evelyn said, her voice soft but sincere. "I couldn't have done this without you." Riley shrugged, glancing down at her scuffed sneakers. "I didn't do much." "You did more than you realize," Evelyn replied. "You gave me a chance to fight back." Riley looked up, meeting Evelyn's gaze. For the first time, she saw not just a powerful businesswoman, but someone who had been through her own struggles and come out stronger. "Come inside," Evelyn said. "We have a lot to talk about." Riley hesitated, then nodded, following Evelyn back into the house. The night had been one of betrayal and revelation, but it was also the beginning of something new, a chance for both women to rebuild and move forward, stronger than before. The following morning, the Harper mansion felt oddly serene. The storm of betrayal and confrontation from the previous night had passed, leaving behind a quiet stillness. Evelyn Harper sat in her private study, staring at the now clean desk where the night's damning documents had once been spread. The media was already buzzing about Daniel's arrest. Headlines speculated on everything from his motives to Evelyn's resilience in the face of such a shocking betrayal. She had instructed her public relations team to release a carefully crafted statement emphasizing her safety and her commitment to moving forward. Riley sat across from her, sipping coffee from a mug too large for her small hands. She still looked out of place, her tattered hoodie a sharp contrast to the polished luxury of Evelyn's surroundings. "So, what happens now?" Riley asked, breaking the silence. Evelyn leaned back in her chair, folding her hands in her lap. "Now, we make sure the rest of Daniel's plans are dismantled before they can cause any more damage." Riley's brow furrowed. "You mean Sean?" "Exactly," Evelyn replied. "Daniel may have been the instigator, but Sean is just as guilty. He helped forge documents, tampered with the car, and likely has more skeletons in his closet than we've uncovered." Riley fidgeted, her gaze dropping to the floor. "And you're sure he doesn't know you're alive?" Evelyn allowed a faint smile. "Not yet. That's where you come in." Riley's eyes widened. "Me? What can I do?" "You're resourceful, quick on your feet, and most importantly, unknown to Sean," Evelyn explained. "I need you to follow him, watch where he goes, who he meets. Lisa will guide you and keep you safe." Riley hesitated. The idea of diving deeper into this world of deception and high stakes made her stomach churn, but the look in Evelyn's eyes, a mix of trust and determination, pushed her to nod. "Okay," she said quietly. "I'll do it." Later that afternoon, Riley found herself in the back seat of Lisa's car, parked across the street from Sean's office building. She wore a baseball cap and sunglasses Evelyn had handed her, which felt more like a costume than a disguise. "See him yet?" Lisa asked, her eyes scanning the building's entrance. Riley shook her head. "No, but there's a lot of people going in and out." "Stay sharp," Lisa said, tapping her phone. "He'll show up." Minutes later, Sean emerged, his leather briefcase in hand. Riley's heart skipped a beat as she watched him stride toward a sleek black car parked at the curb. "There he is," Lisa murmured. "Stay low." They tailed him cautiously, weaving through traffic as Sean drove across town. He finally stopped at a small cafe tucked into a quiet neighborhood where he joined a man at an outdoor table. Lisa handed Riley a small recording device. Stay close enough to hear, but don't draw attention to yourself. I'll be nearby if anything happens. Riley swallowed hard, clutching the device as she stepped out of the car. At the cafe, Sean leaned back in his chair, his expression smug as he sipped his coffee. With Daniel gone, the plan hasn't changed, he said to the man across from him. I'll handle the board transition. As long as no one suspects foul play, we're in the clear. The other man nodded. What about Evelyn's assets? If she really is, out of the picture? Sean smirked. Everything's already in motion. It's just a matter of time before it's all under my control. Riley's hands trembled as she held the recorder steady, capturing every word. She ducked behind a potted plant when Sean's eyes briefly scanned the area, her pulse pounding in her ears. Sean's phone buzzed, and he glanced at the screen before standing abruptly. I've got to go, he said, tossing cash onto the table. Keep your end secure. We'll regroup soon. The two men parted ways, leaving Riley scrambling to get back to Lisa's car undetected. Did you get it? Lisa asked as Riley slid into the passenger seat. Riley nodded, holding up the recorder. Every word. Back at the mansion, Evelyn listened intently to the recording, her expression darkening with every sentence. It's enough, she said finally, setting the device down. Lisa nodded. The evidence ties Sean directly to the conspiracy. Between this and the documents you found last night, the case against him is airtight. Evelyn's gaze flickered to Riley, who sat quietly at the edge of the room. You did well, Evelyn said, her voice softening. Better than I could have asked for. Riley shrugged, though her cheeks flushed slightly. I just followed directions. It was more than that, Evelyn replied. You've been braver than most adults I know. The next step was setting the trap. Evelyn coordinated with her legal team and the police, ensuring that Sean would be caught in the act of trying to seize her assets. 2 days later, Sean received an invitation to an emergency board meeting at Harper Enterprises. The message appeared to come from Daniel's email account, which Evelyn's tech team had discreetly reactivated. When Sean arrived at the boardroom, he found it empty, save for Evelyn, seated at the head of the table, her gaze cool and unyielding. Surprised to see me? Evelyn asked, her voice calm but laced with steel. Sean froze, his confidence evaporating in an instant. Evelyn, I thought that I was dead, she finished for him, standing slowly. You and Daniel were thorough, I'll give you that, but not thorough enough. Before Sean could respond, 2 uniformed officers stepped into the room, their presence unmistakable. You're under arrest, one of them said, placing Sean in handcuffs. Evelyn watched as he was led away, a sense of finality settling over her. That evening, back at the mansion, Evelyn found Riley in the kitchen, sipping a glass of water. It's over, Evelyn said, leaning against the counter. Riley looked up, her expression unreadable. Really? Evelyn nodded. Sean's been arrested. Daniel won't be able to manipulate anyone from where he's going. The company is safe. For the first time in days, Riley let out a small, relieved laugh. That's good, right? Evelyn smiled faintly. It's a start. She reached out, resting a hand on Riley's shoulder. You've been through a lot these past few days. I won't forget what you've done for me. Riley hesitated, then smiled. You've done a lot for me too, you know. I didn't think people like you cared about people like me. Evelyn's gaze softened. Maybe I needed this as much as you did. As the two stood there, the weight of their shared experiences began to lift. It wasn't the end of the road, but it was the beginning of something new, something stronger. The glow of the sunset filtered through the massive windows of the Harper mansion, casting long shadows across the hardwood floors. Evelyn Harper stood in her study, gazing at the skyline as if searching for clarity in the sprawling city before her. The events of the past few days had left her feeling both victorious and hollow. Sean and Daniel were behind bars, their schemes dismantled, but the betrayal lingered like a stubborn stain on her carefully curated life. The board had rallied behind her, offering their support, but true trust, seemed like a distant memory. Behind her, Riley hesitated in the doorway, unsure if she should interrupt. She had never seen Evelyn like this, so still and quiet, as though the weight of everything had finally caught up to her. "You okay?" Riley asked softly, stepping inside. Evelyn turned, her expression unreadable. "As okay as I can be, I suppose." Riley approached cautiously, her hands tucked into the pockets of her jacket. "I was just thinking, you've got your company back. The bad guys are out of the picture. That's good, right?" Evelyn allowed a faint smile. "It is, but when someone you trust betrays you, it leaves a mark. You start questioning everything. Everyone." Riley nodded, leaning against the desk. "Yeah, I get that." Evelyn tilted her head, studying the girl. "You've had people let you down, haven't you?" Riley's gaze dropped to the floor. "More times than I can count. My dad, mostly. I kept thinking he'd come back, that he'd get his act together, but he never did." The raw honesty in Riley's voice tugged at something in Evelyn's chest. "How do you move on from that?" Evelyn asked, surprising herself with the question. Riley shrugged, her voice quiet. "I don't know. You just do. You stop waiting for them to change and figure out how to take care of yourself instead." Evelyn nodded slowly, turning her gaze back to the window. Wise words. The next day, Evelyn met with her lawyer, Alan Graves, to finalize the restructuring of her estate and the company's management protocols. Alan was a meticulous man, known for his ability to anticipate every potential legal complication. "With these changes," Alan said, tapping the stack of documents in front of him, "there's no way Daniel or Sean or anyone else can exploit the company again. Your assets are secure." Evelyn nodded, feeling a flicker of relief. "And the clauses about suspicious circumstances?" "They're ironclad," Alan assured her. "If anything happens to you, control of the company passes to the board, not to any individual." It was a safeguard she should have implemented long ago, but hindsight, as always, was 20/20. As Alan packed up his files, Evelyn felt a sense of closure beginning to form. The practicalities were handled. Now, it was time to focus on something more personal. Later that evening, Evelyn joined Riley in the kitchen, where the girl was awkwardly trying to use the high-tech stove to heat a can of soup. "You know, there are easier ways to do that," Evelyn said, smiling as she reached for a pan. Riley stepped back, letting Evelyn take over. "I'm not exactly used to this kind of kitchen," she admitted sheepishly. As they worked together, Evelyn said, "I've been thinking, you shouldn't have to keep living the way you were before all this." Riley glanced at her, frowning slightly. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you're capable, smart, and brave. With the right support, you could do anything you wanted," Evelyn said, stirring the soup. Riley shifted uncomfortably. "I don't know. I'm not really cut out for anything fancy." Evelyn turned to face her, her expression earnest. "It's not about being fancy. It's about having a chance to build a life you're proud of. A life where you don't have to wonder where your next meal is coming from or where you'll sleep at night." Riley hesitated, her defenses rising instinctively. "Why do you care so much? I mean, I'm nobody to you." Evelyn placed a hand on Riley's shoulder, her voice soft. "You're not nobody. You're the reason I'm standing here right now, and I see so much potential in you. Let me help." For a long moment, Riley said nothing. Then finally she nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "Okay." The days that followed were a whirlwind of change. Evelyn enrolled Riley in a local community college and connected her with a counselor to help her navigate her transition into a more stable life. Riley, though hesitant at first, began to open up, slowly shedding the armor she had built over years of hardship. One afternoon, Evelyn returned to the mansion to find Riley sitting at the kitchen island, a textbook open in front of her. "What are you working on?" Evelyn asked, setting down her bag. "Creative writing," Riley said, her cheeks reddening slightly. "I'm supposed to write a short story about a turning point in someone's life." Evelyn smiled. "That sounds like something you'd be great at." Riley shrugged, but there was a flicker of pride in her eyes. "Need any help?" Evelyn offered. Riley hesitated, then pushed the notebook toward her. "Maybe just a little." As they worked together, Evelyn felt a warmth she hadn't experienced in a long time, a sense of connection, of purpose beyond the walls of her company. That evening, as they sat by the fire, Riley asked, "Do you think things will ever feel normal again? For you, I mean." Evelyn considered the question, staring into the flickering flames. "I don't know if they'll ever be the same as they were before, but maybe that's not such a bad thing. Sometimes things have to fall apart so we can build something better." Riley nodded, leaning back in her chair. "Yeah, I get that." The two sat in comfortable silence, the crackling fire filling the space between them. They were an unlikely pair, brought together by circumstances neither of them had chosen, but they had found strength in each other. And for the first time in a long while, both felt a glimmer of hope for what lay ahead. The air in the Harper mansion was unusually light that morning. Sunlight streamed through the windows, and the faint aroma of freshly brewed coffee wafted from the kitchen. Riley was seated at the kitchen island, nervously adjusting the strap of her backpack as Evelyn entered the room. "First day of classes," Evelyn said, smiling warmly as she poured herself a cup of coffee. "Yeah," Riley mumbled, her fingers drumming against the countertop. "It's just community college. No big deal." Evelyn set her cup down and placed a hand on Riley's shoulder. "It's more than a big deal, it's a step forward, and those aren't always easy." Riley managed a faint smile, though her stomach churned with nerves. "You'll do great," Evelyn added. "I believe in you." Riley nodded, shouldering her bag as she headed toward the door. Evelyn watched her go, a mix of pride and hope warming her chest. Riley had come so far in such a short time, and it reminded Evelyn that rebuilding was always possible, even in the wake of betrayal. At the offices of Harper Enterprises, Evelyn strode into the boardroom with an air of quiet authority. Today's meeting was more than routine. It was a chance to re-establish her leadership and address lingering doubts about the recent scandal. The board members murmured among themselves as Evelyn took her seat at the head of the table. She let the silence linger for a moment before speaking. "Thank you all for being here," she began, her tone steady but firm. "I know the past few weeks have been turbulent. Betrayal at this level is not something any company is prepared for, and I take full responsibility for the oversight that allowed it to happen." The room stilled as Evelyn's words hung in the air. "However," she continued, her gaze sweeping the room, "I want to assure each of you that measures have been taken to ensure this never happens again. New protocols are in place, accountability has been strengthened, and Harper Enterprises will come out of this stronger than ever." There was a smattering of nods around the table, the tension easing as Evelyn outlined the specific steps she had taken to safeguard the company's future. By the time the meeting adjourned, the board's confidence in her leadership was restored. Evelyn left the room with her head held high, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. Meanwhile, at the local courthouse, Daniel and Sean faced their day of reckoning. Both men were escorted into the courtroom in handcuffs, their expressions grim. The evidence against them was overwhelming, from the tampered brakes to the forged documents and recorded conversations. Evelyn had opted not to attend in person, trusting her legal team to handle the proceedings. Instead, she followed updates from Lisa, who sat in the gallery. "They're squirming," Lisa texted, "especially Sean. He keeps glancing at the jury like he's hoping for a miracle." Evelyn allowed herself a small smile. It was a satisfying image. The trial progressed swiftly, the prosecution laying out a damning case, By the end of the day, both men were convicted of multiple charges, including conspiracy and attempted murder. Sentencing would follow, but the verdict brought a sense of closure. When Lisa called with the news, Evelyn felt a weight lift from her shoulders. "It's over," Lisa said. "They won't be a problem anymore." Evelyn exhaled deeply. "Thank you, Lisa, for everything." "Any time," Lisa replied. "You deserve this win." That evening, Evelyn sat by the fire with a glass of wine, reflecting on the day's events. Justice had been served, but the experience had left her with scars she knew would take time to heal. Riley returned home late, her cheeks flushed with excitement as she burst into the living room. "You're back," Evelyn said, smiling. "How was your first day?" Riley grinned, dropping her bag onto the floor. "It was actually kind of cool. The professor said my writing sample was really good. He even asked if I'd thought about submitting something to the college magazine." Evelyn's smile widened. "That's wonderful, Riley. You should be proud of yourself." Riley plopped onto the couch, her energy infectious. "I mean, I was nervous at first. Everyone else seemed to know what they were doing. But then I thought, if I can handle everything we just went through, I can handle this." Evelyn laughed softly. "That's the spirit." They sat together, the warmth of the fire and their shared triumphs creating a rare moment of peace. "Do you think they'll stay in jail?" Riley asked suddenly, her expression serious. Evelyn nodded. "Yes. The evidence against them was strong, and the justice system will do its part. They won't be able to hurt anyone else." Riley looked thoughtful for a moment, then said, "I'm glad you're okay, Evelyn. I don't think I've ever really had anyone to look up to before. But now, I do." Evelyn's chest tightened at the girl's words, and she reached over to squeeze Riley's hand. "Thank you, Riley. That means more to me than you know." As the evening wore on, Evelyn found herself thinking about how much had changed in such a short time. The betrayal that had nearly destroyed her had also led to something unexpected, a connection with someone who had reminded her of the value of kindness and resilience. Evelyn glanced at Riley, who had fallen asleep on the couch, her head resting on a throw pillow. For the first time in what felt like forever, Evelyn allowed herself to believe that the future could hold something brighter. The morning sunlight spilled into the Harper Mansion's kitchen as Evelyn poured herself a cup of coffee. Across the counter, Riley sat with her textbook open, scribbling notes into the margins of a notebook. The once guarded teenager now seemed more at ease, her shoulders less hunched, her presence no longer tentative. "You're really diving into that assignment," Evelyn said, smiling as she sipped her coffee. Riley glanced up, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. "Yeah, well, the professor said this could be published if it's good enough. I guess I just want to prove I can do it." Evelyn's smile widened. "You've already proven so much, Riley. This is just another step forward." Riley shrugged, but couldn't quite hide her small grin. The calmness of their routine was still new to Evelyn. For years, her mornings had been filled with a relentless rush of calls and meetings, her focus consumed by her company's demands. Now, as she watched Riley begin to carve out a path for herself, Evelyn realized how much she had missed by not taking the time to nurture connections outside of her professional life. Later that day, Evelyn met with her executive team at Harper Enterprises. Though the chaos of the past few weeks had subsided, there was still work to be done. "As you know," Evelyn began, addressing the group, "the company has always been my priority, but recent events have reminded me of something important. Our greatest strength lies in the people who drive us forward. That's why I'm making some changes to our culture." Murmurs of curiosity rippled through the room. "Effective immediately, we'll be launching a new initiative to support underprivileged communities through mentorship programs and scholarships," Evelyn continued. "It's not just about giving back, it's about investing in the future, in people who might not otherwise have the chance to succeed." The room erupted into applause, the executives clearly energized by the new direction. As Evelyn left the meeting, she felt lighter. The initiative wasn't just a business decision, It was a personal one. Riley's courage and determination had inspired her to pay forward the kindness that had helped them both. Back at the mansion, Riley was sprawled across the couch with a novel when Evelyn walked in. "How was your day?" Riley asked, setting the book down. "Productive," Evelyn replied, settling into a chair. "I announced the mentorship program to the team." Riley raised an eyebrow. "That thing you were talking about? Where you help people like me?" Evelyn nodded. "Exactly, and I'd like you to be part of it, if you're interested." Riley sat up, her eyes widening. "Me? What could I do?" "You've lived it," Evelyn said gently. "You know what it's like to struggle, to feel invisible. Who better to inspire someone else to keep going?" Riley considered this, her expression thoughtful. "I don't know. I mean, I'm still figuring stuff out myself." "And that's okay," Evelyn replied. "But think about how much your story could mean to someone who's in the same place you were just a few months ago." Riley nodded slowly, a spark of excitement beginning to show. The next morning, Evelyn and Riley went to visit one of the community centers where the new program would launch. The building was modest, its walls adorned with colorful murals and inspirational quotes. Inside, a group of teenagers gathered for an art class, their laughter and chatter filling the air. Riley hung back, watching as Evelyn spoke with the center's director. "These programs will be life-changing," the director said, shaking Evelyn's hand. "We're grateful for your support." Evelyn smiled. "This is just the beginning. Let me know what else we can do to help." As they walked back to the car, Riley finally spoke. "That was cool. Those kids looked happy." "They have potential," Evelyn said. "Just like you." Riley glanced out the window as they drove away, her mind racing with possibilities she hadn't considered before. That evening, Evelyn found herself scrolling through old photos on her tablet. Pictures of her and Daniel at corporate events, smiling for the cameras, now felt like relics of another life. She paused on an image of herself from years ago, standing in front of the first building she had purchased for her company. Her expression in the photo was one of fierce determination, but now, Evelyn realized how much she had sacrificed to maintain that fire. She had built an empire, but had neglected the connections that gave life meaning. "Is that you?" Riley's voice startled her. Evelyn looked up to see Riley standing in the doorway, holding 2 mugs of tea. "It is," Evelyn replied, setting the tablet aside. "A long time ago." Riley handed her a mug and plopped down on the couch. "You look intense." Evelyn chuckled. "I was. Back then, all I cared about was proving myself. I thought success would make me happy." "And did it?" Riley asked. Evelyn stared into her mug, her smile fading slightly. "It did for a while, but it also isolated me. I let ambition take over everything else." Riley was quiet for a moment, then said, "You're different now." Evelyn looked at her, surprised. "Am I?" Riley nodded. "Yeah, I mean, you're still, like, super intimidating sometimes, but you're softer, in a good way." Evelyn smiled, touched by the comment. "Thank you, Riley. That means a lot." The bond between them continued to grow, each finding strength in the other's presence. Evelyn had started to rebuild not just her company, but her sense of purpose. And Riley, for the first time in years, felt like she had a home. Though the road ahead was still uncertain, both women had learned that resilience and kindness could light the way forward. Together, they were rebuilding brick by brick, day by day. The crisp morning air carried the scent of freshly cut grass as Evelyn Harper stood at the edge of her property, watching Riley toss a ball to a group of children gathered on the lawn. The community center had organized a small event to celebrate the launch of Evelyn's mentorship program, and the mansion's spacious grounds had been transformed into a hub of laughter and activity. For Evelyn, it was more than just an event. It was a culmination of months of reflection, rebuilding, and a newfound purpose that extended beyond the boardroom. "Ms. Harper?" A voice interrupted her thoughts. She turned to see a young woman holding a clipboard, her bright smile framed by the logo of the community center embroidered on her shirt. "Everything's running smoothly," the woman said. "The kids are having a great time." Evelyn smiled. "Thank you for coordinating all of this. It means a lot to me." The woman nodded and walked off, leaving Evelyn to watch as Riley high-fived one of the kids, her laughter blending with the cheerful chatter around them. As the day went on, Evelyn found herself mingling with the attendees, listening to stories of struggle and perseverance that mirrored her own. She spoke with parents who had been inspired by the program, teenagers who were eager to join, and volunteers who shared her vision of creating opportunities for those who needed them most. Riley eventually joined her by the refreshment table, wiping sweat from her brow as she grabbed a bottle of water. "Having fun?" Evelyn asked, a teasing smile tugging at her lips. Riley grinned. "More than I thought I would. Those kids have so much energy." "They look up to you," Evelyn said. "You've already made an impact." Riley's smile faded slightly as she twisted the cap off her bottle. "It's weird. A few months ago I didn't think I mattered to anyone. Now people are listening to me. It's kind of scary." Evelyn placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "That feeling never really goes away. But the important thing is what you do with it. And I have no doubt you'll do great things, Riley." Riley looked up at her, a flicker of uncertainty giving way to quiet determination. Later that evening, as the event wound down, Evelyn stood in the kitchen, washing dishes while Riley dried them. The rhythm of their movements was comfortable, a sign of how far they had come since the tense, uncertain days when Riley first arrived at the mansion. "You know," Riley said, breaking the silence, "I think I want to write about this. Everything that's happened." Evelyn glanced at her, curious. "What kind of story?" Riley shrugged, her hands pausing over a plate. "Something about how people can surprise you. How one small moment of kindness can change everything." Evelyn smiled. "That sounds like a story worth telling." Riley nodded, her gaze distant. "Yeah, I think it is." The following week, Evelyn received a call from Lisa, her private investigator turned occasional confidant. "You'll want to hear this," Lisa said. "Daniel and Sean's sentencing just came down. 15 years for Daniel, 20 for Sean." Evelyn exhaled slowly, the news settling over her like a weight finally lifted. "Thank you, Lisa," she said, "for everything." "Just doing my job," Lisa replied. "Take care of yourself, Evelyn. You've earned it." As Evelyn hung up, she felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. Justice had been served, but it didn't erase the betrayal she had endured. Still, she knew she couldn't dwell on the past. She turned her attention to the stack of papers on her desk, plans for expanding the mentorship program, budgets for new community initiatives, and a letter of thanks from one of the students Riley had helped at the event. Evelyn's phone buzzed with a text from Riley. "Finished my story. Want to read it?" Evelyn smiled and typed back a quick reply. "I'd love to." That evening, Riley handed Evelyn a neatly typed stack of pages. "It's not perfect," Riley said, shifting nervously as Evelyn took the papers. "But it's honest." Evelyn sat in the living room, the soft glow of the fire casting shadows across the walls as she began to read. The story was raw and heartfelt, capturing not just the events of the past months, but the emotions that had driven them: fear, courage, betrayal, and hope. Riley's words painted a picture of resilience and the transformative power of kindness, reminding Evelyn of just how far they had both come. When she finished, Evelyn looked up at Riley, her eyes glistening. "It's beautiful," she said. "You have a gift, Riley. You should share this with the world." Riley's cheeks flushed, but she smiled. "Maybe someday." Evelyn leaned forward, her expression serious but warm. "You've already inspired me, Riley. I know you'll inspire others too." As the days turned into weeks, Evelyn and Riley continued to build their new lives. The mentorship program flourished, helping countless young people find hope and opportunity. Riley thrived in her studies, her confidence growing with each step she took toward her dreams. One evening, as they sat on the back patio, watching the sun dip below the horizon, Riley turned to Evelyn. "Do you think things happen for a reason?" she asked. Evelyn considered the question, her gaze thoughtful. "I think things happen, and we find the reasons in what we do next." Riley nodded, her expression contemplative. "Yeah, I like that." They sat in silence for a while, the cool evening air wrapping around them. Evelyn reached over, giving Riley's hand a gentle squeeze. "No matter what happens next, we'll face it together." Riley smiled, her grip tightening in return. Together. As the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, Evelyn and Riley sat side by side, two lives forever changed by the unexpected kindness that had brought them together. It wasn't the life either of them had planned, but it was a life filled with hope, resilience, and the promise of a brighter future. As the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, Evelyn and Riley sat side by side, two lives forever changed by the unexpected kindness that had brought them together. It wasn't the life either of them had planned, but it was a life filled with hope, resilience, and the promise of a brighter future. If you enjoyed this story about perseverance, kindness, and hope, don't forget to subscribe for more heartfelt and inspiring tales. Your support means the world, and it helps us share more stories that remind us of the power of connection.